Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into news from Kenya, specifically from November 19th, 2024. We've got a whole bunch of articles here from Kenyan news sources, and, well, let's just say we're going to try and figure out what's really going on over there.
Sounds like a plan. Kenya is always a fascinating place to follow. I mean, you've got the politics, the economics, the culture. It's never a dull moment.
Yeah, you always got to be on your toes, keeping up with Kenya. And speaking of things that keep you on your toes, let's talk about this tension that's brewing between the Kenyan government and religious leaders, especially in that Nyanza region.
Yeah, Nyanza has always been a bit of a hotbed politically, but this time it seems like it's really heating up. I mean, you've got religious leaders actually threatening a tax boycott. That's a pretty big deal.
That's a huge deal. What's driving this, though? What are they so upset about?
Well, they're saying it's a whole bunch of things. They're talking about government oppression, economic mismanagement, that sort of thing.
So the usual grievances, huh?
Yeah, I mean, those are always simmering under the surface,
Mm.
but this time it feels different. They're claiming that this current government is only interested in benefiting the political elite, like they've completely forgotten about the ordinary people.
And they're putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. Didn't the Catholic Archdiocese of Nairobi reject a donation from President Ruto himself?
They did. It was a 2.6 million shilling donation, which is no small amount. They cited ethical concerns, specifically this public fundraising appeals bill, this new law.
Okay, so this bill, is that what's really at the heart of all this?
It's a big part of it, yeah. The government's saying it's all about transparency and accountability, making sure that religious institutions aren't using donations for shady purposes. But the religious leaders, they're seeing it as an attempt to control them, to silence them.
Almost like a power grab.
Exactly. It's like who gets to control the narrative? Who gets to decide what's said and what's not said? It's a classic power struggle. And the Archbishop of Nairobi even publicly challenged President Ruto to address the concerns raised by the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops, the KCCB.
So they're not holding back, are they?
No, they're not. They're really going for it. And the KCCB, they're not just some fringe group. They're a powerful voice in Kenya. And they've been raising concerns about political infighting, human rights violations, and, basically the government's spending priorities. They're saying, hey, you're not focusing on the things that really matter to people.
So how's President Ruto responding to all of this? Is he listening? Is he engaging with these concerns?
Well, publicly, he's calling for unity. And he's warning against spreading what he calls falsehoods. It's very carefully worded, of course, classic political speak. He has to tread carefully here.
Yeah, he can't afford to alienate such a large and influential group.
Exactly. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Does he try to appease the religious groups? Does he double down? Who knows?
This is the Deep Dive, folks. We're bringing you the real drama, the power plays, the Kenyan edition. So, speaking of power plays, let's move on to what's happening in the Kenyan parliament, shall we?
Oh, yeah. Lots of shuffling going on over there. You could almost say there's a bit of a purge happening.
A purge? Oh, that sounds juicy. Tell me more.
Well, it seems President Ruto is shaking things up a bit. A number of MPs who have been seen as, let's just say, less than supportive of his agenda are getting removed from key parliamentary committees.
So he's basically sidelining his critics.
It certainly looks that way, and he's doing it without even calling for an official meeting of his Kenya Kwanza coalition MPs. So it seems like a pretty top-down decision.
Wow. So much for party unity, huh?
Well, in politics, loyalty is a valuable commodity.
Especially when you're trying to consolidate your power.
Yeah.
But couldn't this backfire? I mean, what happens when those sidelined MPs start speaking out?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Will they stay silent and toe the party line? Or will they use this as an opportunity to rally opposition and challenge Ruto's authority?
Only time will tell, I suppose.
Huh.
But one thing's for sure, this is going to make the political scene in Kenya even more fascinating to watch. And speaking of fascinating, this next story has power struggle written all over it. It's about the national government and those county governments. It seems like they're not exactly seeing eye to eye these days.
Yeah, there's definitely some tension brewing there. It all boils down to money, as usual. The county governors are threatening to shut down all county operations within 30 days if they don't get the funding they say they need.
Wow, that's a bold move. What exactly are they so upset about?
Well, the National Assembly, which is controlled by Ruto's party, allocated 380 billion shillings to the counties. But the governors, they were pushing for 400 billion.
So it's a 20 billion shilling difference of opinion.
Exactly. And it's not just about the money itself. It's about who gets to decide how that money is spent. The Senate, which represents the counties, is backing them up on this, saying, look, we need this funding to provide essential services, things like healthcare, education, infrastructure. You can't just starve us out.
They're not mincing words, are they? I mean, shutting down entire counties could have a huge ripple effect.
Absolutely. And that's exactly their point. They're trying to make it clear that this isn't just some political game. This has real-world consequences for ordinary Kenyans.
It's a high-stakes gamble, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
What if the national government calls their bluff?
Then it could get really ugly, really fast. You could have entire counties without basic services, hospitals unable to function, schools shutting down, garbage piling up in the streets. It would be chaos.
And it's the ordinary people who would suffer the most, the ones who rely on these services the most. It's a classic case of political maneuvering having real-world consequences.
It is, and it really highlights the challenges of Kenya's devolved system of governance. The counties are supposed to have a certain level of autonomy, but when the national government holds the purse strings, it creates a real power imbalance.
It does. And just to add another layer of complexity to this already complex situation, the U.S. ambassador decided to call it quits and head home.
Yeah, Meg Rittman, she's gone. Resigned after only 2 years in the position.
Any idea what prompted that?
Well, it comes right after Donald Trump won a second term as U.S. president, so that's probably a factor. But also, Whitman had faced some criticism during her time in Kenya. Some people felt she was too quiet on certain issues like corruption and extrajudicial killings.
Especially during those June Gen Z protests. There was a lot of talk about her silence then.
Yeah, exactly. So her departure could be seen as a win for those who wanted her out. But it also raises questions about what this means for U.S.-Kenya relations going forward, especially with Trump back in the White House.
It's a big question mark. And speaking of question marks, let's talk about that new healthcare system that everyone's been buzzing about.
The Social Health Insurance Fund, or SIF, it replaced the old National Hospital Insurance Fund, but from what I've been reading, it's been anything but a smooth transition.
Let's go, Ro.
Well, the idea behind it is sound, to make healthcare more accessible and affordable. But the implementation, that's another story. People are showing up at hospitals and finding out their registration isn't updated, or the system's down, or they can't verify their payments. It's just a mess.
So people are being denied care.
In some cases, yes. We actually have a couple of specific examples here. Rachel Elagosa in Kisumu. She had a head injury, went to the hospital, got treated, but then she got stuck there for days because the SHIFE system wouldn't recognize her payments. Her sister's been running around trying to get it sorted out, but it's a bureaucratic nightmare. And then there's Jane Otieno. She took a cancer patient to the same hospital, only to be told that the patient wasn't even registered in the system.
Oh, man. That's heartbreaking.
It is. And the manager of Kisumu City, he actually went public, criticizing the national government for not addressing these problems quickly enough. He said the hospitals are struggling to operate because they're not getting paid on time by the Social Health Authority, which manages the SHI.
So it's a whole domino effect.
Exactly. And the government's trying to downplay the problems, but the evidence on the ground tells a different story.
It does. And it'll be interesting to see how they handle this going forward. Will they acknowledge the problems and try to fix them? Or will they just try to sweep it all under the rug?
We'll have to wait and see, but this is definitely something we'll be keeping a close eye on.
We will. But for now, we need to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll delve into some more news from Kenya, including a story about spammers who learned a very expensive lesson. Stay with us.
We'll be right back.
We're back with more from Kenya, and before we move on, I wanted to circle back to that whole tax boycott thing for a second. Why are the religious leaders so fired up about this fundraising bill?
Yeah, it's not just about the money. It's about control. They see this bill as the government trying to, put a muzzle on them, basically.
So it's about more than just filling collection plates on Sunday.
Way more. It's about their ability to speak out against the government, to advocate for social justice. Religious institutions, they often serve as a voice for the voiceless.
That's a good point. And it makes the Catholic Archdiocese rejecting Ruto's donation even more symbolic. Like they're saying, we don't need your money, we'd rather be independent.
Exactly. It's a powerful statement. And, a full-blown tax boycott, that's a long shot. But even the threat of it, it sends a message. It puts pressure on the government.
Yeah, it's definitely a bold move. And it makes you wonder how Ruto's going to respond. But let's shift gears for a minute and talk about those MPs who are getting kicked off parliamentary committees. Is this like a common thing in Kenyan politics, or is this a particularly aggressive move by Ruto?
Well, reshuffling committees, that's pretty normal. But the way it's being done this time, it's raising some eyebrows. It feels like Ruto's targeting anyone who dares to disagree with him.
It does seem a bit heavy-handed. Doesn't a healthy democracy require, some dissenting voices?
It does. I mean, you need a diversity of viewpoints to have robust debate to make good policy. But this move by Ruto, it's like he's saying, my way or the highway.
Yeah, not exactly a recipe for unity.
Mm.
It makes you wonder how those MPs who are being sidelined are going to react. Will they just accept it quietly? Or will they push back?
Well, some might stay silent, to avoid further repercussions, but others might see this as a chance to raise their profile, to
Yeah.
position themselves as defenders of democracy.
Oh, for sure. And the media will be all over that. It's like Ruto versus the rebels,
That's
right?
exactly. It's a classic political drama. And speaking of drama, let's not forget about that standoff between the national government and the counties. I mean, if those governors actually go through with their threat to shut things down,
Oh, man, it would be chaos.
total chaos. Hospitals shutting down, schools closing, garbage piling up. Imagine that.
And who suffers the most in those situations? The ordinary people.
Mhm.
Always the ordinary people.
It's true. And it's a reminder that these political power struggles, they have real-world consequences.
I do. Okay, let's take a break from all this political stuff for a minute and talk about something a little less intense. What's the latest with the social health insurance fund? Any signs of improvement there?
Not really, unfortunately. The problems are still there. And, we got another story here that just highlights how frustrating the situation is. There's this young guy, Otieno, trying to get medication for his elderly mother at a clinic in Nairobi. He's got all the paperwork, he's paid his contributions, but the system won't recognize him.
So you couldn't get the medication?
Nope. He spent hours arguing with the staff, but it was like talking to a brick wall. They're like, the system is the system. There's nothing we can do.
So what happened? Did his mom just go without?
He ended up having to borrow money from a neighbor to buy the medication from a private pharmacy. It's just crazy. The system was supposed to make things easier, but it's actually making them harder.
It's a shame. It really is. What are people saying about it? Are they calling for the government to scrap it altogether?
Oh, there's definitely a lot of anger and frustration. Some people are saying, just go back to the old system. But others are saying, look, the idea is good, just fix the problems.
Yeah, it's like they tried to build a house without a foundation. It's just all crumbling around them.
That's a good analogy. And the health minister, Deborah Barrasso, she's been pretty vocal in defending the new system, saying it's working as intended. But, I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's hard to take her seriously when you see all these stories of people being denied care. It's one thing to look at statistics, but it's another thing to see the human cost of these failures.
Exactly. And it just shows that sometimes, even with the best of intentions, things can go horribly wrong.
It's a good reminder to always consider the human element in any policy decision. Okay, let's move on to something a little more upbeat. How about that little uptick in the Kenyan shilling?
Yeah. A little ray of sunshine peeking through the clouds. After weeks of decline, it's finally showing some signs of stabilizing.
It's a start, right? I mean, it's a small victory, but a victory nonetheless.
Yes.
Especially given all the other economic challenges the country's facing.
Exactly. And speaking of victories, how about that company that got fined for spamming people?
Oh, yeah. 700,000 shillings. That'll teach them.
Right. It's a good reminder that Kenya is serious about data privacy. People are tired of being bombarded with unwanted messages, and the government's finally taking action.
And on a completely different note, let's talk about Kenya's big push into the digital world. I mean, they just broke a world record, right?
They did. They migrated over 18,000 services to that eCitizen platform. It's like a one-stop shop for everything government-related. Pay your taxes, renew your driver's license, all that stuff. It's a massive undertaking.
It is. And it seems like they're really trying to position themselves as a leader in the digital space. But is it the right move? I mean, what about people who don't have internet access or who aren't comfortable using technology?
Yeah, that's a big concern. Digital inclusion is crucial. You don't want to leave anyone behind. And then there are the security risks, the privacy concerns. You're putting a lot of sensitive information online, so you need to make sure it's protected.
For sure. So it's a balancing act, isn't it? Embracing the benefits of technology while mitigating the risks.
It is. But overall, it's an exciting development. It shows that Kenya is looking to the future, and they're not afraid to be bold.
Okay, before we move on, I have to ask about this whole debate about women kneeling before men. I mean, it's 2024. How is this even a conversation?
I know, right? It all started with this comment by a male MP, suggesting that women should show respect to men by kneeling before them. And that just ignited a firestorm, especially among female MPs.
I can imagine. That's just so outdated and patriarchal.
It is, and many women in Kenya are speaking out against it, saying it's degrading, disrespectful. But there are also those who are defending it, saying it's a cultural tradition, a sign of respect.
It's like they're stuck in a time warp.
Yeah, it's a complex issue, and it really highlights the tension between tradition and modernity in Kenya. You've got those who want to hold on to the old ways and those who are pushing for change.
And it's a debate that's not going away anytime soon.
Nope. But the fact that it's happening at all, and in such a public forum, it's significant. It shows that these issues are being discussed, that women are finding their voices, and that the push for equality is gaining momentum.
It's a good reminder that progress takes time,
Yeah.
and it's often messy and uncomfortable, but it's also a sign that things are moving in the right direction. Speaking of moving in the right direction, I heard that Murikwet daughter has a new song out.
She does. Sherehe Kikwatu, which means celebration at home.
Yeah.
And it's fire. I mean, it's catchy, it's upbeat, it's got that classic Murikwet daughter vibe.
Yeah. That's great news. I loved Molly Safi Cheetos, so I'm definitely going to check it out.
You should. And her story is pretty inspiring. She faced a lot of online harassment after her initial success, which unfortunately is something a lot of female artists experience. But she didn't let that silence her. She's back, and her music is resonating with people.
That's what I like to hear. It's a reminder that even amidst all the political and economic turmoil, Kenyan culture is alive and well.
It is. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. From political shakeups to healthcare headaches, from digital advancements to cultural debates, Kenya just never stands still.
It's been quite a journey, and we're not done yet.
Not even close. We've still got some fascinating stories to share, including one about a coffin, a fake news scandal, and a very angry president. But we'll save that for our final segment. Stay tuned.
Okay, you've got me hooked. What's the deal with this coffin story?
Well, it involves a university student, David Uga Mokaya. He got himself in a heap of trouble for posting some fake news about President Ruto.
Fake news, huh? Like what? Did he say Ruto was an alien or something?
Not quite. He posted a story online claiming that there was a military convoy carrying Ruto's body in a coffin.
Whoa. That's a pretty serious accusation.
It is. And the government didn't mess around. They arrested him and charged him with publishing false information, which, by the way, is a crime in Kenya.
So what happened? Did he get a slap on the wrist, or did they make an example of him?
He ended up getting sentenced to 3 months in prison, or he could pay a fine of 50,000 shillings.
That's not too bad, considering. But I guess it sends a message, right? Don't mess with the president.
Exactly. The government's not playing around when it comes to misinformation, especially when it involves Ruto himself. But, it does raise some interesting questions about freedom of speech.
Oh, yeah. Where do you draw the line? I mean, you don't want people spreading lies, but you also don't want to create a climate of fear where people are afraid to speak their minds.
It's a tough balance, and this case has definitely sparked a debate about that. Some people are saying the government's overreacting, that they're using this to silence dissent. Others are saying, hey, fake news is dangerous. It can have real consequences.
Yeah, it's a tricky issue for sure. Okay, before we wrap things up, is there anything else we should touch on?
Oh, actually, yes. The government just announced they're putting 300 million shillings towards upgrading the Manda Airport.
Manda Airport, that's in Lamu County, right? Why are they investing so much in that?
Well, Lamu's becoming a pretty important region. They've got that deep water port that's being developed as a major trade hub for East Africa. And the Manda Airport is a key part of that. So by expanding the airport, they're hoping to attract more cargo flights, boost tourism, create jobs, the whole package.
It sounds like they're really betting big on Lamu.
They are. But there are some concerns, of course, security being a big one. It's close to Somalia, which has had its share of problems. And there are some environmental worries, too. Lamu has a pretty unique ecosystem.
So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, huh? Progress can be a good thing, but it can also come at a cost.
That's true. But hey, that's Kenya in a nutshell, right? Always pushing forward, always trying to find that balance.
It's what makes it such a fascinating place. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about political tensions, economic challenges, healthcare headaches, even a fake news scandal involving a coffin.
Yeah, we've been all over the map.
But that's what the deep dive is all about. Taking a deep dive, so to speak, into the issues that matter. And Kenya, it's a country that always has something going on.
It does. And the decisions that are made in the coming years, they're going to have a huge impact, not just on Kenya, but on the whole region.
So we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on things. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Kenya. Until next time.
See you next time.